welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Kestner, your host. And today is one of those incredibly important episodes where we're going to talk about Take Back the Night in terms of what goes on, real life scenarios, great, amazing motivational ways to plan outcomes. And we have three incredible guests. I'm going to let each one introduce themselves to you. And Gia, how about you first?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Katie. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Gia Lantieri. My pronouns are she, her. I am 22 years old, and I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I'm studying for the LSAT right now. I'm preparing to apply to law school, which is super exciting, as well as working as a volunteer for Take Back the Night and working on my own personal blog and hoping to launch my own personal lifestyle podcast, which I would love to monetize soon.
Wow.
So yeah, super exciting, some creative, like entrepreneurial things in the works for me. But this past May, I actually graduated from Fordham University with my bachelor's degree in communications and culture and a minor in creative writing. And at Fordham, I was president of the Women's Network, which is how I was able to host my very own Take Back the Night event. For those of you who don't know, the Women's Network is a national organization. It is the largest collegiate women's networking organization in North America, and it's designed to cultivate and celebrate women's ambition by connecting community members to industry leaders and professionals and a bunch of professional development resources. So I was actually the president at Fordham's chapter specifically. Since it's a national network, there are over 120 chapters across all college campuses in the US, Ireland, Canada, and a few other countries I might be forgetting right now. But at Fordham, I was the president of that chapter. And so through that organization, I was able to partner with Take Back the Night and host a large scale event for Denim Day specifically.
Very cool, Gian. And Nick, do you want to share where you're from and more about yourself?
So, my name is Nick Bloodworth. I am the Director of Counseling Services at Campbellsville University. So, my role, I oversee counseling operations, crisis response, prevention education efforts across campus. I am currently in my dissertation to finish up my PhD. So, hopefully, in the next 6 months, I will be done and can mark that off of the board. Um, I've been at the university going on 3 years. Our institution has held back the Take Back the Night event for about 8 years. And during my tenure, I've kind of seen the event evolve significantly from initially a small gathering, mostly a handful of passionate students and a few staff members determined to kind of shine a light on issues that were often silenced. And so over time, as we've kind of grown, more survivors have come forward. The conversation around consent and trauma and healthy relationships have become more normalized on campus. And domestic violence is one of my specialties and something that I'm passionate about. So this is definitely an event that I enjoy doing each year.
Awesome, Nick. And just in terms of maybe, I mean, Fordham, I'm not sure, but you're in New York and you mentioned that, Gia.
Yeah, I'm in Campbellsville, Kentucky.
So is that like, what's the nearest big city?
Louisville is about an hour and a half, so University of Louisville is not too far from me.
Okay. Yeah, that's good for context. We got that Southern accent, Nick, but I didn't know exactly whereabouts you were in the state. So that's really helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Molly, go ahead.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me here, Katie. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Molly Harris, and my current role is at Bucknell University, and I am their Director of Interpersonal Violence Prevention and Advocacy. I just hit my 8-month mark there, so I'm relatively new in the role. Before there, I did work for 3 years at a domestic violence resource, a couple counties over, and I also was able to receive my master's degree in victimology from the University of Portsmouth, which is a school in England. So this is actually my first Take Back the Night event that I have coordinated. I've been present at one other event at a different university, but it was really exciting to be able to take on this challenge, so new within my role at Bucknell, and I'm really excited to see what else we're able to do to support survivors on campus.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. So let's, since we have such diverse, perspectives represented and different types of campuses and locations, and Bucknell's more in the center part of Pennsylvania. There's a little river along, but not too close to major cities, except for Harrisburg, maybe in the middle. And then we've got Fordham right in the middle of New York, pretty much, with two campuses. And then Campbellsville. Is it Campbellsville, Nick?
Yes, ma'am. Campbellsville
Yeah. So Campbellsville,
University.
would you call it more rural? Like, is that the main event in the town? Like,
Yes, it is.
you're the main show. Okay. So lots of different kinds of environments. And I guess let's start at the beginning. So in terms of, your most recent one that you all planned, how many people were on the committee? How did you form the plan? Like, how did you get the whole concept started? Was it something where you carried over anything from what had been in the past, or were you importing ideas? Like, so let's start out with like how you got planning going. Gia, do you want to start with your event?
Yeah, of course. So for me, like I said before, I was the president of the Women's Network, which is a national organization, but it served as a club on campus. So for me, I always felt really strongly connected to this mission of Denim Day and just raising awareness and solidarity for sexual assault and abuse survivors. So I kind of took it upon myself to reach out to my committee, my executive board, and ask them what they thought about hosting an event like this. So the first step for us was researching nonprofits to partner with. And my good friend Meg, she was the VP of marketing on my executive board, because on the executive board you had the president, the vice president, VP of marketing, marketing committee, all that stuff. She was the VP of marketing, and she was doing outreach for me for a bunch of nonprofits. And Take Back the Night emailed back. I'm not sure if it was Katie or Amy who emailed us back, but we kind of just got a good vibe. I hopped on a call with Katie and Amy to discuss my vision for this event. And since that call, it kind of just kickstarted us calling weekly for, I think, 4 months to plan.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we did a lot of intense planning.
We did, because the thing is I never hosted an event like this. We had a pretty large scale event at Fordham, and my vision for it was that I really wanted it to be a big thing. I wanted there to be a bunch of food. I wanted there to be a lot of giveaways and a lot of people to show up. And so I kind of just started it from scratch, and I didn't really know all the logistics of how to plan and run an event like this. So getting on the phone with Katie and Amy from January to April, which is when the event was, it was April 23rd, was really helpful, because it really just it helped me when I would communicate to them my vision. They would then be like, okay, have you reached out to this person? Do you have the money? Do you have the funds for this? And they were constantly reminding me of little things that I needed to do. And then I would take everything that we discussed in our phone call and then bring it to my executive board, and I would delegate the tasks for that week to the VP of marketing, the marketing committee, the event coordinator, VP of finance, the VP of DEI. So we had a lot of people supporting us through it, aka my executive board. But then there was also a lot of people that we had to reach out to that weren't necessarily a part of the planning, but they helped. For example, my friend Audie, he was the president of a major club on campus
Mhm.
called CAB, which is basically it stands for Campus Activities Board, and that was one of the clubs that gets the most funding at Fordham. So for me to be able to be friends with him and reach out was super helpful, because he was then able to connect me with the administrators that I needed to talk to get the funding we needed. So it was a lot of moving parts, but the main people who helped were the executive board for the Women's Network, and then Katie and Amy.
Yeah, and I just want to compliment you too, Gia, and for anyone listening, Gia had an entirely student-led process and team with almost no direct support from the administration. Not that I don't think they were against you, but I was really impressed, Gia, with how well you and your peers, students, really rallied behind and made the vision come to life. So for anyone who's listening who's like, oh, but I don't know that we have any power and control as students, Gia's truth that it really does happen. So congratulations again, Gia. And I know we'll come back to learn more. So Nick, how did you start orchestrating? And it sounds like you had done several before because you talked about like a whole history of events.
Yeah, so the university has been doing them, like I said, roughly 8 years. I've been on campus about three, almost three.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was the first one that the counseling center kind of led. And so Kansas University, our Take Back the Night planning committee has always been very intentional and a very collaborative process. And so we always look at, okay, who are the offices and organizations that interact closely with students, particularly those impacted by sexual violence or dating violence and trauma. And so the counseling center usually initiates the first outreach since we're kind of the core of providing emotional psychological support. And so, we had the Title IX office, we had campus safety, we had student activities and res life, some athletics, some SGA, student government associations. And so different departments and different organizations were part of that. Some local community partners were part of that, like domestic violence advocates and some other crisis center staff. And so the committee kind of forms to this kind of volunteer participation paired with just an intentional recruitment. Who are those who are very passionate about this event and want to help us make this as great as possible, and that we all have a shared vision. And so, by the end of the first meeting or the second meeting, the committee essentially kind of forms itself, and individuals kind of naturally step into their roles. We kind of have a vision of how this event wants to go, looking at the budget, and the committee essentially becomes a blend of what I would call survivor centered passion or trauma informed leadership. And it's a very collaborative campus responsibility. So when we look at last year's event, and we're excited to hope that this one continues to grow and be, even more powerful and well attended than even past. Every year it's kind of grown, and we hope to continue that trend as we go forward. And so that's been how ours has gone. I think we have a few new community partners that are going to join us this year. Those meetings will kick off next month, actually.
Nice, Nick. And so is your event in April as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then when does your committee start planning? Like, Gio mentioned January-ish, December, January. When do y'all start getting things together?
So as soon as the semester ends, so for us, that will be December 12th. So we'll look to meet that following week, the week of December 15th. A lot of the small things like material gathering, shirts, different things of that nature, we've already ordered and kind of gotten taken care of. So the most important thing for us is getting our speakers lined up, getting all the community partners on board. And so usually we try to have all that done by March. That way, everything's in place, and it's just getting excited because we do a week's worth of events
Oh,
leading up
cool.
to the Take Back the Night event.
Okay, we'll come back to more about that in a minute. But thanks for clarifying. And Molly, how has planning, because this would be your first one that you've orchestrated for Bucknell, but I think Bucknell's had some in the past.
Yeah, so Bucknell historically has had their Take Back the Night events in October, in line with Domestic Violence Awareness a month, and so that has probably like historically been a student-run event. We have a student advocacy group called Speak Up, who is really the student advocates on campus that is able to really be the liaisons for student survivors to be able to connect them to resources, but also to really help with like planning events and some of that like more student-led like prevention and education efforts. They graduated a lot of their, I would say the majority of their active members last spring.
Oh,
And so when I stepped into this role and really kind of I knew I had Take Back the Night on my mind like right away coming into this fall semester. Met with the officers, and they did ask just for this year, as they're going through a substantial amount of growth with getting new members and everything, that the IVPA office that I work in was a little more hands on in the support that we were able to provide for the event. And so I feel like, as far as like planning committee, we didn't have one like formally established kind of going into it. I have a similar kind of story as Gia's. I went on the Take Back the Night website and just ordered an events kit, and then Katie and Amy reached out to me, and it was just a really wonderful experience and opportunity. One thing led to another, and we were actually able to bring Katie in as our keynote speaker. Um, and in order to make that happen, we had a lot of co-sponsors for the event, which was wonderful to see all of the different departments and offices on campus really kind of come together and help support this event. So we had sponsorship from Speak Up, which was the student organization that I had talked about, but also Interfraternity Council, Panhellenic Council, our Women's Resource Center, and Women's and Gender Studies Department. A lot of different offices throughout student affairs, and our Title IX office really stepped up to help support this event. So I was really grateful to be able to have that opportunity for collaboration across campus, especially because a lot of us came from different areas on campus where we had our own networks of students that we normally reach out to and interact with. So I thought it was a really great opportunity to kind of demonstrate that university-wide commitment to supporting survivors on campus. And I was really happy with just all of the teamwork that went into coordinating the event.
Yeah, and Molly, I would just say, I think I was so impressed just standing there looking at the audience and seeing like a whole chunk of men, in the middle. They were and they were really engaged. Not that, Nick's here, like that, I think it's just really exciting when you do see such university-wide, commitment and students just really heartfelt participation. And speaking to the fact that, you know, when we can engage everyone, even if you're not a survivor, and that builds empathy and, more bridges across different groups. And then, next time, if the Women's Center is asked to come, or, the Sexual Violence Center is asked to go and work with another group, or Black Student Union, it's like, it's really important to see those. All of it's important, right? Like how we care for each other, and when we are hurt or harmed, like how we come together to support. So I just felt like that was one of the things I enjoyed just from the outside seeing happen when I was there. Okay, so let's talk about something else. So, Nick, especially because you've done so many, and I think another important part of Take Back the Night is kind of what's the goal of the event? Is it to maximize attendance? Is it to raise awareness? Is it sometimes they're out there doing like, we need to change these policies, we need better, safer, um, you know, lighting, we need more, so there's all kinds of motivations and themes. And I don't know if you all want to speak to not only what you did at your event, but maybe some of those themes around the entire campus community. And Nick, since you had also local community members from the town, what are their concerns too? And for context, last spring, we got a request from the city of Boston. It was really cool. They had created a whole new position of nighttime, like in the mayor's office, I think it was, and they had a nighttime safety committee, like especially bars and like not adequately carding people, and a lot of bad things can happen at night. So they were trying to figure out how to raise more awareness in the whole city, not just about like gun violence, but just even this kind of sexual violence and safety and domestic violence. And people, what do we do if there's a couple and they're having a terrible brawl in the parking lot, right? Is that anybody's business? Because it escalates so fast, right? And then you take it home and it gets worse. So it was just an example I was bringing up is, when we do these events, there's lots of motivations and different constituents that might say, well, we really need to do better, or we want to bring in more people. And one other one I was thinking of, and I can share it with you all and our listeners, was just a hospital wanted to do something because they had so many victims come in who they didn't come in reporting sexual violence. They came in reporting, like, they'd broken their arm. But it was really as a result of, domestic violence or some other thing. So they were thinking, wow, we really need to get more awareness happening because we're seeing it in the ER. And we know that behind closed doors, things are happening. So again, like I hope our listeners who are going to hear this will start to think creatively about where the nooks and crannies are, or the EMTs often are on the front lines too. They'll show up and see things that they're guessing what actually happened. So I think one of the important things about Take Back the Night is it's an actual event. It's not like a social media thing. Like, we're getting humans out to really address an issue, often in person now that COVID's over. So let's talk. So themes and motivations. Gia, what about, you mentioned a couple. Do you want to talk more about them?
Yeah, of course. So for me, I have obviously I was a Fordham student for 4 years and I loved my experience there so much. And I was very involved on campus and I always saw really large scale events happen on our main green spaces in our McShane Center, which is where we actually had our Denim Day event, which is like a great hall where a lot of fun events happen. I would see so many events occur with large groups following them, and it was always like for fun campus activity stuff, but it was never for like a meaningful initiative. And so for me, I always have felt very strongly about sexual abuse and sexual assault and just raising awareness for the issue. But it's been a little bit disheartening to see on campus that we have all these huge events with, like there's food, there's music, there's dancers, there's sometimes like inflatable, what's it
Those
called?
jumping
Slide.
things.
Yes, there's so much going on all the time. Fordham's a very active campus in that way, but there was never anything going on in that way for something meaningful like this. So for me, I really wanted to host a large event that had more meaning. And we have a group on campus called USG. It stands for United Student Government, and it's a pretty big club. And they get a lot of funds from our school as well. And they actually have a committee on sexual misconduct that does stuff for Denim Day. They take T-shirts and pieces of denim and they kind of just drape them across the gate in like our campus. There's a green space called Eddie's Parade. It's like the main green space everyone hangs out on, and there's like a gate surrounding the green area. And so you'll see that during Denim Day and during that week. But besides that, there was never any like conversation. So I really wanted to open up a conversation. And so for our event, we had four speakers come. We had Katie, we also had Antoine, we also had Margaret Holzer, and we also had Helene Weiss. And those are four speakers from Take Back the Night. And that was all because Katie and Amy were, again, super helpful in helping me plan this event. And having those speakers come to talk to the students who gathered for our event was so impactful. And it created more conversation for us to discuss ways that we can stand against sexual violence on campus that felt more vulnerable and intimate
Mhm.
and just more meaningful.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would just add to what you said, Gia, is like that the way we had all four of us with totally different walks of life, right? And different experiences, but it was so good to like talk about one or two ideas and then look at it round table and then toss everything right back out to your audience and students to get their feedback and think with us. It was like a big old brainstorming session and inspiration. It was so much fun. It was just really inspirational, I think, for everyone to be in that space. And the food was delicious. I was like, I
It
want to
was,
take it all on the plane with me. But
yeah, inspiring is a really good word. I left that room feeling changed, honestly. I
yeah,
felt really empowered and inspired by all the strength that was given. Like you and Antoine, Helene, and Margaret, the words that you shared, the stories, the advice. you guys opened up so much and were so vulnerable with us, and your strength just shined through, and it was felt and heard by everyone in that
Yeah.
room, which is really special. And I don't know if that would have happened if it wasn't kind of like a roundtable conversational event,
Yeah, we
which was
moved
really
all the chair. I mean, I think this is another important part, since luckily I got to be at two of your events. I think it's not always the case that we can move all the chairs and like make sure that everyone's in a big circle. And even if the circle was a few deep, it was just nice to have the conversation type style and not like a lectern. Like, remember, we set that up, but then we were like, nobody wants that. And we had all the mics, and then everybody could just talk. And we did like mini intro speeches, and then we just went around and did themes. It was really explorative, and just whatever was in the moment that needed to be
Mhm.
talked about. I think it was awesome. So I guess for our listeners, again, like that's a whole different type of experience than maybe what you've done with just having the speaker and then going on the walk, and doing an open. I mean, the open mics are good, but sometimes we can all reflect on this too. I think sometimes the open mics can start to feel like exhausting, because it's almost like trauma after trauma after trauma. And while hearing all the stories is really powerful, I started thinking about this more recently. Like, if there's power in sharing your story, there's also power in hearing feedback, right? And standing with, because if it's just the story, it's like a monologue. And the dialogue seems to me right now, where we are in society, is we need to have conversations. We need to share our thoughts and feel included and heard, on both directions, like all of it. That's just my personal thoughts, you guys. Like,
Yeah. And for context, when I had planned this event, especially with Katie and Amy, we had planned for it to be kind of a lecture, for it to
yeah,
be run by a panel. We wanted it to be 2 hours long, 1 to 3 p.m., four speakers. They talk to us for like 20 minutes each. We have intro, conclusion. But unfortunately, not everything always goes as planned. And so when we noticed that not a lot of people were filling the seats, we had expected a larger amount of people to show up, and we had a smaller number. We decided to just change
like
the seating
on the
arrangement
spot.
to more of like a round table conversation. That was all Katie, honestly, and I really do give you props to that. Props for that. And the intimacy level there was not expected, but it was really valuable.
Yeah, and just imagine for our listeners, like that space was massive. I mean, it was like a huge hall, and it was beautiful and airy and light filled. But I think we made it our own. Like, we made it into a comfortable, intimate space the way we did it. So I like, and yeah, I really liked it. So it's just different. So I'm super happy you're on the show today, Gia, because like that's not the norm, but I think it's really good for listeners to hear like all the different ways. And so, Nick, now we're to you. And so you've done these 8 at least, or so. Oh, you said 3 at Campbellsville. Um,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah. So tell us like what's been really powerful, or like how you did the most recent one. And what were the motivations? Because yours sound the most like inclusive to the community too, which I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. Our event, is kind of like everybody, typically runs about 2 hours. And, we'll have a guest speaker that will come after, then that's kind of the heart of our event. And then after that, we move into the kind of resource education. So there's where the representatives from the counseling center, the local advocacy organizations, crisis, providers kind of offer information about services that are available to survivors, and then we kind of move into the candlelit march or vigil there, which kind of symbolizes reclaiming that public space and standing together in solidarity. But after this last event, we did a lot more research, and all of my counselors, we all have different specializations, and one of the things that we discussed and something that we're going to be launching this year is getting away from the traditional sense that Take Back the Night is just this one 2-hour event. And so, what we're going to be doing this year is building that entire week of education,
Yeah.
healing, and awareness. And so, about 10 years ago, I attended another event where I was a guest doing some education on domestic violence and trauma work. And so, I went back to that time and I was like, I think that this would be great. I think this structure will be one that kind of sets up for the big event because it allows these series of workshops to prepare students emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually for this main event. And so, there'll be topics which we've done last year. We did a couple of topics that week of Take Back the Night event, but this year will be more intentional. We did some trauma one-on-one. We did some bystander interventions. Men as allies. Myself and one of my other clinicians, Dr. Wesley Paul, were really big on engaging male students in this event in prevention and support. And we've had a lot of athletes show up, especially to this last event. And so, one of the things in gathering some education and talking to other universities is doing it this way, the structure where we are intentional about this week long education leading up to the event, is that it helps prepare students emotionally for the heaviness of Take Back the Night. Because we do notice, and I've noticed the last 3 years doing these events, it is emotionally heavy for a lot of students. A lot of students kind of hang around at the conclusion and will kind of talk with us about some of the things that they're experiencing, some of the emotions, especially if as they hear some of these survivor stories. And some of them are like, hey, I want to speak up now. This is something that's happened to me. Can I just hold some space with you all to engage with you all about me looking to take some steps forward? And so we're hoping this year especially, we noticed it last year as we had some of those workshops that week, is that attendance grew. At some of these workshops, attendance grew. During the lunch events, we had a big banner for consent,
That's
and
cool.
students were coming up and signing it.
Awesome.
And so we got a lot of feedback after the event that kind of doing those things helped students feel safer. It helped them feel more grounded and more connected coming into the big event. And so we wanted to do that a lot more this year to just prepare them. And so, they're not just physically there, they're there emotionally, they're there intellectually, they're there spiritually, and they're all prepared to kind of hold that space. And they've heard the language. The hope is that they've heard the language enough so when they're there, they're kind of accustomed to some of the language that we're utilizing, or they might be hearing from the community partners as we talk about resources and things like that available.
That's awesome, Nick. I love how it sounds very like a warm blanket. um, you know what I mean? Like knowing that the students have such amazing resources in their administrative team and the counseling center, that's huge. I mean, I think you can sometimes as a student, I know for me personally at William and Mary, when everything was going down, it was like, y'all the enemy. Like everyone at my school I felt like was against me. It was terrifying. Even the students were against me. So it's so refreshing and wonderful to see and hear from you and how much care and concern you have for just making sure the students get the support they need. I have an event coming up in December. Again, I don't know when we're going to drop this, but I have in just a few more weeks, I'll be up by Gia, outside of New York, doing a Heart to Healing workshop as part of they're doing, like you said, they're doing it's a community, a 2-year college, and they're doing it over 3 days. And they're doing theirs in December because December is the 16 days of global activism against gender-based violence. So they wanted to schedule theirs in December during that time because they have so many international students. They were, wanting to be inclusive to their, diverse backgrounds and cultures and countries. And so one workshop that they wanted, I went over like, I would say like, here's all these like ideas and, different ways of approaching it. And they too, like you, wanted to make sure their students felt really held, especially because, if they're from far, far away, it might be really hard for them to feel safe here. or comfortable. So I wanted to do this Hurt to Healing workshop for them. So I'm really excited, to hear from you about like that kind of level of concern for caring and helping students, take those first gentle steps. Because it's really scary if you don't know if someone's going to believe you or support you or say, I'm here for you, whenever you need me. So thanks for being that kind of representative of your institution, Nick. I'm certain it helps so much.
It does. I like your warm blanket. We look at it as stepping stones. They move students from awareness to understanding so that the event can move them from understanding to empathy and action.
Oh, nice. I like that too. That's a really good tagline. Okay, then Molly, what about like it going into, and now, I'm sure you're already thinking about next year and next steps. So it's, I don't know if you want to talk a little more about like how you talked about how you got a lot of people there. What was the main goal for this October event?
Yeah. So just from the feedback that I received kind of stepping into this role, I think Take Back the Night, in at least the last couple of years, kind of lost some momentum
Mm,
a little bit with attendance, with just kind of people being interested and willing to kind of show up for even like lead up events to Take Back the Night. So, I mean, my big goal was to kind of really make this a big thing again. And so I also really wanted to, focus on empowerment through storytelling for survivors and to really highlight, their courage and resilience. And I think your keynote address, perfectly was able to accomplish that and be able to amplify, survivor voices and to really get a bunch of people in a room and to really show the survivors like who are willing to attend an event and be allies to survivors. And so we did start off with your keynote address, which I will say like I was really trying to kind of look through the crowd to gauge reactions and everything, and I felt so hopeful, right? Looking at like body language and facial expressions and everything, that your message, Katie, was so impactful to them, um, and that I really felt a sense of hope that they were going to leave that room and be able to really retain and apply your messages, particularly regarding bystander intervention and just treating people with respect. And I think the timing of our event, that was especially important because our Take Back the Night event was the Wednesday before Halloween weekend,
ooh,
which,
party.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So I think this was perfect timing, and I think especially I wanted to focus on obviously empowering survivors, but also inviting groups on campus that might not typically show up to these types of events.
Mhm.
So I was really excited to kind of have that duality of supporting survivors. Like we still went on the march. We had a sign making kind of event before Take Back the Night that students
Right.
could come and kind of decorate their own signs to take on the march with them. And we did have an open mic, and I hear you, Katie, on that. Can be exhausting. And we marketed the Take Back the Night as yes, of course, survivors could go up and tell their story, but we also said that supporters could go up to share their words of support. And we had a couple of people express themselves through music and poetry, and so we did try to have it be more of an uplifting kind of vibe for that open mic, which I think was really good for the people that were in attendance. But we had our open mic like outside in kind of a public area, and so we had a lot of folks that were just kind of going into that building, just stop by and listen and hopefully reflect on what they were hearing too.
Nice.
So that was really hopeful for me. And I think just kind of moving forward, as you said, I am already kind of thinking about next year as well. And I think just kind of raising the standards and trying to push the boundaries and be the best that we can be with this event, because the survivors deserve it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice of you to say it that way too, Molly. And here's just one more thing. It reminded me when you said Halloween. And I can tell I'm like, now I'm glowing because it's so dark outside. And I turned off all the lights in my office. It's like now my face is like a ghost. So I apologize, listeners. But what I was thinking about, Molly, is a long, long time ago, I've done so many bazillion different projects, and I made before there were any training videos, like on this is going to sound really embarrassing, on a VHS tape. um, like right after I graduated from college, I got 4 survivors, and my colleague at Harvard was in charge of the Women's Center, and we made a video called "Please Write Back." And the name of I can even talk about this. Like the name of the podcast is Dear Katie, and that's because, and I don't know that I've talked about this on the podcast, but a long time ago, people wrote to me because Time Magazine gave out my address without my permission, so they could, write to me. And most of the snail mail letters were really like nice and supportive. So anyway, I would get lots of letters like "Dear Katie," and then it was always like "P.S. Please write back" at the end. Like they told me their story, and then they would like, "I'm so glad I'm not alone." Like it was so nouveau back then. But I made this training video, and one of the survivors I met at Amherst, and she was raped on Halloween. And she told her story in my video. And I remember now, I was just thinking about how important it is. Like, you don't want a major, think about like New Year's Eve and Halloween, like all these major dates in our lives, and you don't want to ruin them forever with sexual violence. So I'm thinking we should raise another awareness campaign about Halloween. I kind of like that idea. I mean, I feel like there's so many parties that happen, especially at college, with crazy amounts of alcohol and people acting out of the ordinary. There's just like an excuse, right? So I think you should keep doing it in October. Plus, it's the red zone, right? So we have like that first 6 weeks of college when there's more vulnerability. So I'm thinking definitely like that was a great idea. And I wish more schools would do maybe two events, like one in October and one in April, so you can cover both awareness months too. And then there's December, now that I mentioned the international event. But there's no bad time to raise awareness. Like you were saying, Gia, you walk around campus and it's like we got all this stuff going on all the time, and it's all fun and games until like we have what happens, behind closed doors. So okay, last question for all of you, to round us out is, I think, just a personal motivation. If you're willing to talk about like your own commitment and what your goals are. Nick, you already mentioned you're almost done with that PhD, and Gia's going to law school. But I think that's also part of the journey. Is this is one aspect of our lives, and it is really personal. And if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to tell us all. But if you can allude to what's meaningful to you about Take Back the Night and also this issue. So anything and everything is welcome. Gia, do you want to start?
Yeah, so for me, I think that I've always been someone who's wanted to open up conversation in a way that's vulnerable, and I've always wanted people to feel safe and comfortable opening up around me and in my space and my energy. And I think that there's so much in today's day and age that goes unsaid because one, technology, screens and phones, and just it's like people, social skills have just honestly decreased sometimes. People just hide behind their phone and people don't open up as much, I think, which makes it hard. But also, like, I just, with everything that goes on in today's day and age with like the headlines and the news, I just think it's so important to consistently talk about this stuff. It's not like I've ever had a personal experience that has made me feel directly associated and connected with sexual abuse or sexual assault. It's more so just like this overarching feeling within me that like these issues need to be discussed, like not daily, but at the same time, like weekly. Like they need to be talked about all the time. And I just feel like, especially on college campuses, it's really easy to get caught up in your own life. You have so much going on when you're a college
Mhm.
student. You're like running around from this social event to this club to this class to this. There's just a lot going on. And I think that creating space to have, like you said before, Katie, dialogue about issues
Mhm.
like this is really important, and it takes intention. You know, everyone's busy, everyone has their day-to-day lives, and even after college, things don't necessarily slow down. Life is just, it gets busier sometimes. So I think for me, the biggest thing was creating a space where people feel like they can come and talk and, you know, zoom out of their life and just feel safe and comfortable to do so.
Nice. Thanks, Gia. And I'm excited for your law school ambitions. I'm certain you'll be amazing, an amazing attorney. So keep going, keep going. And Nick, turning it to you, what's your big picture look like?
I think for me, what's most meaningful is that this event represents something that we don't see nearly enough, and I think that's collective courage.
Mm,
In my work as a counselor, I sit with students every day who carry stories of harm, shame, confusion, and survival. Many have never spoken their truth or they feel unseen or unheard or dismissed. And so this event becomes a place where those experiences are acknowledged rather than minimized, where survivors' voices are centered rather than silenced. And so what motivates me is watching the shift that happens in people's hearts during this event. And a lot of times you can feel it. You know, someone who walked in quietly or unsure begins to kind of soften because they realize I'm not alone. You know, someone who, doesn't think sexual violence is their issue. They hear a survivor story and suddenly understand the weight of what so many live with. And so there's just something powerful about creating the space where truth and healing can coexist, where people can speak without fear, they can grieve without judgment, and be believed without hesitation. And so this issue kind of matters deeply to me because violence thrives in silence. Shame thrives in silence. And for many survivors, and, I have my own issues in my childhood. And so, especially for young adults, navigating identity, independence, and relationships for the first time, that silence becomes suffocating. And I believe that this event disrupts that silence. It pulls trauma out of the shadows and says, we see you. Your story matters and your healing matters.
my gosh, that was like right out of a poetry book, Nick. That was so gorgeous. You sound like you could give a speech for an hour, and people would just be hanging on the edge of their seat. Just
Thank you.
so comforting and reassuring. I think to think about again that collective courage. I like that a lot. I mean, it's like we can all feel isolated and vulnerable, and then all of a sudden we can unite together and look at like how powerful we are with our own stories, sharing them. So thank you for being there for so many and being vulnerable yourself. I'll say we, the collective we, out there, I know appreciate you quite a bit. So thank you for coming on the show too. And then last but not least is Molly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I feel really driven by really cultivating that culture of respect on campus. And I think events like Take Back the Night are so important to, again, as I said, really bring people together, to show survivors who are in the room, one, who are the allies that are there to really be able to provide, support and a sense of safety for folks on campus, but then also to really, there's so much work that still needs to be done, right? And I think it's really wonderful to be able to have events like Take Back the Night, but also to really think strategically about the way that like the field of survivor advocacy is evolving, as is the student population. And so one thing that I really want to make clear, in kind of in alongside, providing support to survivors, is also like making a strong effort of really eliminating violence on campus, right? And so I think really trying to, um, you know, do what we can to show survivors, like, yes, are here to support you, but we also don't tolerate violence, any type of interpersonal violence, and making the efforts to not only do kind of that more of that like proactive prevention and support, but also to really just band together and to be a cohesive force around survivors to really support them, and to, you know like I said, I know elimination of violence can seem insurmountable, but I think we owe it to survivors to demonstrate that that is the ultimate goal. And so really having that prevention and support kind of go together to really make the best environment for survivors on campus as we can.
Yes, beautiful. Thanks so much, Molly. And I think that's a great note to land on, is like what's going to happen in the future is this: we should not tolerate, and we should do everything we can to prevent. And the bystander, as you mentioned before, is one of my personal goals, is how do we empower everyone to be part of the solution and that whole, collective good force. So thanks to all three of you. This has just been so exciting to hear from each of you about your different campuses and experiences and visions. And I know all three of you are going to go out there and continue to do amazing work. And for our listeners, I think if you haven't had a Take Back the Night at your campus or your community, we at Take Back the Night certainly have tons of like downloadable how to plan an event guides, and all kinds of resources to help support you, and incredible people. We can even probably partner you up with anyone on this meeting today, or our podcast, to learn more about their events. That's the nice thing about this community, is I think we're all here to support one another and encourage each other when it feels like, especially, to go alongside, especially, I'm just thinking of you, Gia, like there were the moments where we're like ready to pull our hair out because things are so frustrating. We're like, how are we going to make this happen? But I think that's the if one of us feels like weak at the moment, the other one's right here to pull us up. So that is the community that exists in the overall Take Back the Night community. So this was a different kind of podcast episode than our normal survivor stories and various healing modalities, but hopefully this will be an inspirational episode to all of you to know there are lots of people out there doing many, many good events and caring very much about our collective healing and safety of our community. So until the next episode, everyone, take care, thrive, and survive. Take care until then.